March 1945. Cold morning mist clings to the ruined edges of a field hospital outside Remagen, where the Rhine River trembles under distant artillery. The war's final months have stripped everything down to bone and ash. Burned-out vehicles line the muddy road. A shattered ambulance leans against a collapsed barn, its doors blown open by an airburst only hours before. Inside, scattered across the floor among torn bandages and broken stretchers, lie dozens of envelopes, some stained by smoke, others still sealed. They are letters written in careful German script, the kind nurses hid in coat pockets or tucked inside small cloth pouches sewn into their aprons. Letters from parents describing empty towns, letters from husbands on distant fronts, letters from children too young to understand a world collapsing around them. An American patrol, cautious but curious, steps into the wreck. One Sergeant Benz picks up a bundle tied with thin red string. He doesn't know yet they belong to the German nurses captured earlier that morning when they were forced to abandon the convoy under SHELLFIRE. As the prisoners wait in the cold, anxious and silent, the Americans approach, not with rifles raised, but with the letters in hand. A moment hangs in the air, quiet and unreal, preparing the ground for everything that led to this unlikely human exchange. To understand why those letters mattered so deeply, one must return to the state of Germany's medical corps in early 1945. The Western Front was collapsing with startling speed. The German army, battered during the retreat from the Ardennes, now faced overwhelming force along the Siegfried Line. Fuel shortages immobilized entire units. Field hospitals were relocated repeatedly, often days apart. As the front shifted unpredictably, the German Red Cross nurses, many barely in their 20s, found themselves carrying responsibilities far beyond their training. They treated the wounded in drafty schools, damp basements, barns converted into makeshift aid stations. Supplies dwindled, anesthesia ran out, stretchers were reused until they fell apart. The sound of approaching American armor became a constant reminder that the lines were no longer reliable or even coherent. In this chaos, letters became anchors. They connected these women to a home they might never see again. Many wrote on scraps of whatever paper they could find. They protected incoming letters with a devotion that bordered on ritual. Some folded them into medical bags, others kept them inside undershirts, close to the skin. Losing them meant more than losing paper. It meant losing a part of themselves. Meanwhile, US forces were advancing with momentum that surprised even their own command. The crossing of the Rhine at Remagen on March 7, 1945, when American troops seized the Ludendorff Bridge unexpectedly intact, accelerated a strategic shift. Whole German units surrendered rather than be trapped between the river and converging American divisions. American patrols swept up prisoners in large numbers, infantrymen, Volkssturm, clerks, and medical staff caught in the chaos of retreat. In this environment, medical convoys became accidental casualties of movement. Some were hit by artillery while evacuating the wounded. Others were forced to abandon vehicles under air attack. Regulations under the Geneva Convention provided protections, but the battlefield rarely respected them. Ambulances caught in the wrong place at the wrong time were treated like any other vehicle by the blasts that tore through forests and villages. When American soldiers discovered medical staff among captured groups, their procedures differed sharply from the brutal precedents on the Eastern Front. U.S. command emphasized humane treatment of medical personnel, regardless of nationality. Nurses were processed separately from regular posts whenever possible. Belongings like letters, if harmless, were often returned, unless tied to intelligence. But the war's final months blurred boundaries. Soldiers did not always know who belonged to which unit or how they had been captured. Documents mixed with debris, personal effects scattered in ditches and wrecks, which is why, on that cold March morning, when a patrol found bundles of personal letters inside a wrecked ambulance, the decision to return them was not simply routine. It was shaped by days of rapid advance, cramped POW corridors, and a growing understanding among U.S. troops that Germany's war machine was disintegrating, leaving behind not just soldiers, but civilians and medical workers caught in its collapse. These forces converged directly into the moment when German nurses, standing under guard near the road, saw the Americans approach with something they had never expected to hold again. For the German nurses, the letters represented home in its most fragile form. Many had evacuated hospitals multiple times, losing trunks, blankets, even uniforms along the way, but they protected their letters with a persistence that defied exhaustion. One nurse later wrote that she could withstand hunger and sleeplessness, but not the thought of losing the last words her mother had sent before their village was bombed. So when they were captured near fear settled over them that the Americans would confiscate everything, treat the letters as propaganda, burn them, or simply discard them. When the US soldiers instead returned the envelopes, still tied with the same thin strings, it felt completely out of place in the brutality surrounding them. That emotional shock created a moment few of the nurses ever forgot. The letters were discovered not through planning, but through the routine inspection of abandoned vehicles. US patrols, advancing past German positions, often checked ambulances, wagons, or command cars for mines, booby traps, or hidden documents. The wrecked ambulance near Remagen had been hit by artillery while trying to maneuver around a collapsed bridge. Inside, the Americans found blankets, scattered medical tools, and the bundles of letters. From a military perspective, they were harmless. No maps, no unit orders, no coded messages, just personal correspondence. The tactical decision to return them carried no risk, but the gesture resonated far beyond protocol. American command in 194445 emphasized strict adherence to the Geneva Convention, especially after encounters with Allied medical personnel mistreated earlier in the war. Guidelines for handling medical staff were reinforced during briefings. This meant that nurses, even in uniform, were classified as not. Their personal items were to be respected, unless directly tied to military operations. Returning the letters reflected these standards. It aligned with a broader effort to distinguish the US Army's conduct from the harshness seen in other theaters of war. For the German nurses, who had heard unsettling rumors of revenge or brutality, the ethical clarity stood in stark contrast to what they feared. There was also a subtle morale component. By treating captured medical staff with dignity, American units indirectly weakened German resistance. Soldiers were more likely to surrender if they believed their non-combatant colleagues would be treated well. US intelligence reports from early 1945 noted that humane gestures, simple, small acts could accelerate surrender rates as German morale crumbled. Returning the letters wasn't an official psychological operation, but the effect was undeniable. Word spread among German medical units that the Americans were firm, but fair. Such perceptions shaped countless decisions during the final weeks of the war. When many units chose to surrender rather than fight to the last man, these angles seamlessly shaped the world in which the turning point unfolded. Decisive moment came in the second week of March 1945, as US forces exploited their foothold across the Rhine. A small American detachment, a mix of infantrymen and medics, was tasked with clearing a stretch of road leading toward the East Bank fields near dead livestock, overturned carts, and abandoned equipment cluttered the route. Not far from the riverbank, they encountered a group of 20 German medical personnel walking under a white flag. The group included surgeons, orderlies, and 7 nurses still, wearing their armbands marked with the Red Cross. They had fled their previous station under heavy shelling and had been separated from their ambulance convoy in the confusion. Standard procedure followed. The nurses were escorted to a holding area beside the road, guarded but unharmed. The Americans recorded their names, checked for weapons, and searched personal bags for military documents. Several nurses had kept only the essential items they could carry: a pair of scissors, a roll of gauze, and small bundles of letters they thought still with them. They didn't yet know those letters had been left behind in the wrecked ambulance only half a kilometer away. When the patrol discovered the envelopes during vehicle inspection later that morning, the officer in charge made a simple decision: take them back to the owners. No dramatics, no ceremony, just a practical, humane order. As the Americans approached, the German nurses watched with tense uncertainty. Their hands trembled. Some prepared themselves for confiscation or accusations. Instead, the patrol leader held out the bundled letters and asked, through a translator, who they belonged to. Silence stretched. Then, one nurse stepped forward, recognizing her mother's handwriting. Another saw her husband's signature. A third burst into tears before she could speak. The Americans handed the letters back one bundle at a time, offering no speech, no gesture, only the action itself. To the nurses, this moment didn't just defy expectations, it dismantled weeks of fear. They had seen retreating columns bombed, wounded men abandoned, and families displaced. Yet here, in the shadow of a bridge still shaking from artillery, their most personal belongings were returned by the very army they had been told to fear. The war continued around them, tanks grinding across fields, artillery thundering from the hills, but the moment carved out a small pocket of quiet humanity, and from that point onward, the consequences of this encounter would travel far beyond the road where it happened. After the letters were returned, the German nurses were transported to an American field processing center west of the Rhine. POW camps for medical personnel differed significantly from those holding regular combat troops. Nurses were typically separated, assigned safer quarters, and given responsibilities related to camp hygiene or minor medical tasks. Interrogation reports from the period described these women as cooperative and deeply exhausted. Many expressed relief that the Americans had not confiscated personal belongings. Others described the moment they received their letters as a turning point in their psychological state, replacing fear with cautious trust. Within days, several of the nurses were relocated to larger processing facilities in France. Here, Red Cross representatives confirmed their identities and ensured adherence to Geneva protections. The letters they carried were logged as personal non-military property and allowed to remain with them. For some, these were the only items they retained through the remainder of the war. American documentation from March-April 1945 reflects a growing effort to identify, catalog, and respect the possessions of captured medical staff. This contrasted sharply with earlier years when confusion on fast-moving fronts often led to property being seized or lost. The war's final act showed a more consistent pattern of discipline among U.S. units regarding non-combatants. The nurses later recalled their impressions of American soldiers. They noted firmness, strict procedures, and an unexpected degree of fairness. Several described the letter-returning incident as the moment they realized surrender had brought a kind of safety. It softened perceptions, reduced panic, and shaped interactions with guards and medics in the weeks that followed. The act also echoed beyond the individuals involved. As Germany disintegrated, stories of humane treatment, even small ones, spread among scattered units. Some Wehrmacht soldiers reportedly surrendered more willingly to American forces, partly due to the belief that their injured or medical staff would be protected. In the broader historical record, similar incidents occasionally appear in POW accounts. U.S. troops were known to return photographs, prayer books, family items, and sometimes even food rations to captured medical workers. These gestures didn't change the course of the war, but they changed experiences, replacing fear with a glimpse of decency amid the destruction. From these accounts, a clear thread emerges. The return of the letters was not just a kind act, but a reflection of a disciplined military culture rooted in rules, ethics, and a desire to set a standard that would be remembered long after the war ended. And it is exactly from this emotional landscape that the closing reflections naturally rise. This story endures because it reveals something rare in modern industrial warfare, a moment when humanity briefly overcame momentum, ideology, and destruction. The letters did not affect strategy. They did not shorten the conflict, but they represented the fragile, irreplaceable threads connecting individuals to the lives they left behind. For the German nurses, they were reminders that beyond military service, they were daughters, wives, sisters, and mothers. For the American soldiers, returning the letters was a straightforward act, but one that acknowledged those identities without hesitation. War often reduces people to categories: enemy, prisoner, asset, threat. Yet these envelopes forced both sides to see the human beneath the uniform. Even in a world fractured by ideology and violence, compassion could still surface in the most unexpected of places. When history looks back at the spring of 1945, it often sees maps, armies, and the collapse of a regime. But on a quiet road near Remagen, amidst wreckage and retreat, a simple gesture revealed something deeper, that even as the war reached its most destructive phase, the capacity for empathy endured, and in that quiet exchange of lost letters, returned to trembling hands. The war briefly paused, allowing humanity to speak through the noise one last time. Thanks for watching this video.